Good morning. Today is Monday, September 4th, 2023. Intellectually, I understand that at some point, self-driving cars will save millions of lives. The World Health Organization estimates that every year approximately 1.25 million people are killed in traffic accidents, and over 20 million people are injured in traffic accidents. And those numbers will dramatically drop with the advent of the autonomous vehicle, a self-driving car, because that will remove the number one factor in car accidents, which is humans and human decision-making. Once that's removed and a computer has worked out all the options in a fraction of a second, the accuracy of the decision-making will be so much improved that, according to one expert, the sooner autonomous vehicles are on the road and human drivers removed from driving decision-making, the sooner we can start saving literally millions of lives. But there's a central moral issue in how self-driving cars are programmed, which receives a lot of attention from scholars of Jewish law. And what I want to share with you this morning is a very brief overview of a tremendously complex and nuanced subject. So this is just a taste. Secular philosophers and ethicists refer to this as the trolley problem, first raised by Oxford University professor Philippa Foot in 1967. But years earlier, this was an actual case referred to Chazon Ish, Rabbi Avraham Karelitz, the great halakhic authority who lived in Bnei Brak in the 40s and the 50s. And I am indebted to Rabbi Chaim Jachter for his series of essays that collect and present the sources that I will share with you. So here's what happened, an actual story, and it happened in Haifa. You know, Haifa is a city with lots of hills, up and down, lots of hills. There was a taxi driver in Haifa, and he was driving down a hill, and his brakes failed. So the car was heading toward a group of people. Without the brakes, it would kill them. The only way that he could avoid killing this group of people, because he was on a narrow street, is to swerve the car so that it would kill another separate individual standing a few feet away. So those are the only two choices he had. The only two choices he had, he couldn't stop. He could either keep going straight and kill a group of people, or swerve the car and kill only one separate, a different person. So what he did was he swerved the car, he killed that individual, and he saved the group that was right in front of his car. When that happened to him, of course, he was traumatized. He was a religious Jew. And he went to Chazon Ish, who was the greatest halakhic authority in Israel at that time. And he asked him, did I do the right thing? Yes, of course, it's after the fact, but he wanted to know. And so Chazon Ish investigated this scenario in a very, very deep way. Because the question is, what do you do if you have to decide between killing many people, if the only way to save them is to divert the car or the trolley or whatever it is that we're talking about? and kill a different single individual. Now, in this case, all the people we're talking about are innocent, and they've done nothing wrong. The question is just which target are you going to hit when you don't have a choice, you only have a choice between the many or the one. To put this in terms of stark Jewish law, if you swerve the car to avoid hitting the group, are you fulfilling the highest mitzvah in the Torah of saving lives? Hatzalas nefashos, saving lives is the highest mitzvah in the Torah? Or are you committing the most serious sin in the Torah of murdering an innocent individual? Now, the application to self-driving cars is, instead of a human driver needing to make this heartbreaking, instantaneous decision, the car is programmed in advance for this scenario. So the question is, what should the car be programmed to do? So when Chazon Ish was asked this question, he began his analysis by writing that perhaps we should make every effort to reduce the loss of life as much as possible. And therefore, one would consider the act of the taxi driver as fundamentally an act of rescue and not an act of murder, because the overall effect of what he did is that more lives were saved, fewer lives were lost. In a situation, again, in a situation where someone was going to die, the fact that a death would occur was not at issue. Someone is going to die. Do we choose between the group or the individual? Chazon Ish says perhaps we should try to save as much life as possible. However, given that this is an issue literally of life and death, Chazon Ish leaves the question as theoretical, inconclusive. Tzorach iyon, this requires further study. But that's generally the approach that is attributed to Chazon Ish. Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, known by the name of the Svarim, the books that he wrote, Tzitz Eliezer, another great halachic authority that was a bit younger, junior to Chazon Ish, lived a little bit later. He disagreed strongly with Chazon Ish's preposition. And he came down very strongly in favor of not diverting the car, refrain from an act of murder to that single individual, even if that will save the many in the group. And Rabbi Waldenberg begins by quoting a passage in the Talmud which indicates one is not allowed to save many at the expense of the individual, because every human life has infinite value. And so, Rabbi Waldenberg writes, the critical general principle that our sages have set for us in relating to questions of life and death is that when we are unsure which life to take, meaning, God forbid, Nebuch, lives will be lost. But the question is, should it be the few or the many? The only way we can relate to this is to be in a state of passivity. Shev valtasa. Status quo. Don't do anything. And this is true that we're required to remain passive because it's impossible to resolve whose lives is more valuable. If one life has infinite value and several lives have Infinite value, well, the definition of infinite is you can't get any greater than that. So there is no way to quantify whether the value of the group is greater than the value of the individual. And so, in the case of a car, if the car is going straight and there's a group in front of it, and the only way to avoid the group is to change the path of the car, to swerve, to hit an individual, Tzitz Eliezer says, stay passive, stay on the same track, don't make any change, even if that means that you will take the lives of the group, but don't do an action that actively causes the death of an innocent victim. Tzitz Eliezer concludes with these definitive words. In any case of certain killing, there is no distinction between the individual and the multitude. For we do not say that the multitude is to be favored. Rabbi Avraham Kook, first chief rabbi of Israel, explained this concept using these words. We do not have the wherewithal to estimate the infinite value of the individual against the infinite value of many individuals. So this dispute between Chazon Ish, Tzitz Eliezer, and of course there are many others that enter into this dispute, and there are permutations and scenarios that make this a very, very complicated subject. However, notwithstanding this classic dispute between Chazon Ish and Tzitz Eliezer, it is possible that this entire discussion is not analogous to programming self-driving cars. There is in Israel an institute for halachic implications of emerging technologies. I mean, just to read the title of this institute is something that should inspire every Jew who cares about Jewish law. That there's an institute that is studying the implications of every single technology that is arising in our world. It is under the leadership of Rabbi Usher Weiss, one of the foremost authorities in Jewish law who grapples with every new technological innovation because Jewish law applies to every single situation. And this institute wrote a paper written by a group of its scholars, its rabbis, and the title of the paper is Halachic, Ethical, and Governmental Challenges in the Development of the Autonomous Vehicle, our subject. And they write that when the programmer is writing the program for the car, the programmer writing the program is never entering into a situation where he's deciding, should I kill this innocent bystander? God forbid. What he's programming is, how do I have the best chance of saving every single life? That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to program so that if the scenario arises, the car will respond in a specific manner. But my goal clearly is simply to save the most lives. Certainly my intention is not to kill the individual. And so therefore, programming the car in a neutral environment, meaning when the programmer is working, remember the programmer is in a lab. He's in a factory. She's in a factory. They're working in a space that is not real life. They are programming what will happen when the scenario arises in real life. But when they're programming in this neutral environment and they're giving preference to the safety of the many, it cannot be thought of as a directive to murder, but rather as an expression based on statistics and science of the imperative to save lives. Another younger great scholar, Rabbi Yona Reiss, disagrees with this. He is not convinced with this argument. He says the programmer has simply set up a system that will automatically perform an act that he or she is forbidden to do in such a situation. Meaning, if you agree with Tzitz Eliezer that swerving the car to kill the individual is wrong, it doesn't make a difference if that decision was made in a lab, in a factory, in a hypothetical environment of computer coding technology. It should be prohibited to program in that manner because the programmer is programming a car to do an action, killing this individual, that is an act of murder. So what if the programmer didn't think it was an act of murder? But when the actual case happens, it is an act of murder of this single innocent individual. So what if it was put into motion beforehand? The programmer is still responsible. And so Rabbi Chaim Jachter, after reviewing all of these different sources, comes to the following conclusion: the matter is very much still up for debate. Last year, San Francisco, California, started experimenting with a fleet of driverless taxis. Don't ask me who would get into a driverless taxi. I can tell you one person who would not. But there is in San Francisco a fleet of driverless taxis. Last week, on August 14th, 2 driverless taxis blocked an ambulance which was carrying a critically injured patient who later died in the hospital. And this accident is just the latest in a series of accidents relating to self-driving cars, many of them in San Francisco and in other places where self-driving cars are starting to be used. Aaron Peskin is the president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, like the city council. And he said that the accumulative total of incidents involving driverless cars was very alarming. He said, quote, "All of them have a common theme, which is autonomous vehicles are not ready for prime time." But I assume that that time will come soon. They will be ready, and they will save lives. Hopefully by that time, there will be a consensus among authorities in Jewish law. The only question will be, which lives will they save? My friends, I wish you a great day, a safe day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.